It's your boy Charles. Charles on as well, just checking in. Hope you guys having a good evening. We are getting ready to delve into another book audio reaction. Let's go ahead and play it, and I'm gonna come back with my reaction. Appreciate it, guys.
Tupac was taken to Manhattan's Bellevue Hospital, but didn't remain there long. He feared for his life, and though the Fruit of Islam provided security, they weren't carrying guns. He left Bellevue and was admitted to Metropolitan Hospital under an assumed name, but said he still received an anonymous, threatening phone call from someone saying, "You ain't dead yet?" Shortly after surgery, he checked himself out, against doctor's orders, and went to the home of his friend, actress Jasmine Guy. They'd worked together on the sitcom A Different World. He played Jada Pinkett's thugged-out ex-boyfriend, Piccolo. Tupac's father, Bill Garland, visited him while he recovered, and they stoked the fire of their long-lost relationship, even smoking pot together at Guy's place. "I was fucked up," Garland said. He also said he exchanged pleasantries with Biggie, who came to visit Tupac in the hospital. Garland remains convinced Biggie didn't know about the shooting in advance, and at this point, Tupac hadn't accused him either. On December 1st, 1994, Tupac arrived to a New York City courtroom wearing bandages and confined to a wheelchair, and was pronounced guilty of sexual abuse in the Ayanna Jackson case, though acquitted on the sodomy and weapons charges. Sentenced to a minimum of a year and a half in prison, pending appeal, his bail was set at $3 million. To some observers, the case against Tupac was weak, the punishment and bail harsh. Was it payback for his anti-cop lyrics? An in-depth New Yorker article by Connie Bruck concluded that Tupac was penalized more for who he was, a charismatic gangster rapper with a political background, than for what he had done. Unable to raise bail, Tupac served most of his time at Clinton Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison in upstate New York, the same prison where two men escaped in 2015, inspiring a dramatic manhunt where one was killed and the other recaptured. Guards sought to humiliate him, Tupac's lawyer said. A rumor surfaced that he was raped, which he denied. Meanwhile, his paranoia and anger intensified. He called Haitian Jack and henchmen the Walking Dead. Prison wasn't entirely a hardship, however. Tupac dried out. He wrote a screenplay and read The Art of War. Al Sharpton visited. He got mail from Jim Carrey and Tony Danza, the latter of whom urged him to stay strong. "He is the bomb forever," Tupac told MTV of Danza. Maya Angelou came to visit at his request, and he immediately besieged her with questions about James Baldwin and Tolstoy. He signed autographs for fellow prisoners, including a white supremacist who wanted one for his little cousins. While inside, Tupac married a woman he'd been seeing named Keisha Morris, a criminal justice student who was something of a straight arrow. They'd met at a party thrown by Puffy. She was not impressed by his advances, which only made him try harder. On their first date, in summer 1994, they saw Forrest Gump. At dinner afterward, he mentioned that he'd read for the part of Bubba. But their relationship was difficult from the start. Morris lived in Harlem, while Tupac, drawn by cheaper real estate, resided primarily in Atlanta, along with his mother and members of his group, the Outlaws. Morris supported him during his trial and moved close to the prison to better assist him. But following his release, the marriage collapsed. She said she felt used, but didn't harbor animosity. Me Against the World, Tupac's third album, was released soon after his prison sentence began. Its tone was a departure from his first two albums. Whereas Brenda's Got a Baby came from headlines, now his own stories were news, and the album begins with reporters running down his trials and tribulations. He'd never been particularly optimistic, but World descends into full-blown paranoia and anguish, as evidenced by song titles like If I Die Tonight and Fuck the World. Struggling and striving, my destiny's to die, he raps on Death Around the Corner. His album with Thug Life the year previous also reflected his transition from would-be revolutionary to presumably doomed street soldier on songs like Bury Me a G. But Me Against the World also had buoyant tracks like Old School, an homage to New York rappers who laid the foundation of the genre, and Young Niggas, a cautionary tale to would-be baby gangsters. Dear Mama would become one of the most beloved songs in hip-hop history. The album came out a year before Bill Clinton signed his notorious welfare reform law, and the track portrayed its African-American female protagonist as a hero. The song's most famous line, "Even as a crack fiend, mama, you always was a black queen, mama," harbors nuance rare in popular music. Despite little promotion, Me Against the World went double platinum and became his best-selling album yet. Tupac considered making it his swan song. He was tired of all of the music industry drama, but his passion reignited after a disturbing rumor began to sink in. One that came from people he trusted, that Biggie knew in advance about the Quad Studio shooting. "He owed me more than to turn his head and act like he didn't know niggas was about to blow my fucking head off," he said later. And even if Biggie hadn't set him up, he should at least have been able to find out who did it. "You don't know who shot me in your hometown? These niggas from your neighborhood." This probably wasn't entirely fair. According to sources I interviewed for this book, even if Biggie knew about the setup in advance, which is far from certain, he may have been helpless to stop it or warn Tupac, without risking violence upon himself. The way Tupac saw it, the whole thing was fucked. Someone tried to harm him, and when they couldn't do that, the justice system got him for a crime he didn't commit. And now it turned out that his own friend had betrayed him? A friend whom Tupac had helped to acquire fame and fortune? Angry and seeking revenge, Tupac decided he was ready to start recording again, to pay back his enemies.
Looking for a professional photographer for your next big event? Need video of your special day? Then look no further. For $100 an hour, have a professional photographer or videographer shoot your wedding, birthday party, quinceañera, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, anniversary party, or whatever your special occasion may be. Highlight your event with professional, crisp photos and video. Check out Charles Arness Photography on Instagram, as well as book us for your next event. Must live in the Southern California area.
Selling My Soul. Before he went to prison, both Ruthless Records and Death Row were vying for Tupac's services. Tupac rolled with Eazy to industry events. They shared meals, and some Ruthless camp members took to wearing Thug Life caps. "Tupac was around us every day," said Cold 187 from Ruthless group Above the Law. Mo Preem said Eazy had talked with Tupac about signing Thug Life to Ruthless. Eazy's assistant, Sharice Henry, believes that if Eazy were still alive when Tupac got out of prison, he would have signed with the label. Meanwhile, Tupac appeared on the Death Row orchestrated Above the Rim soundtrack and was paid well to record a song for the Murder Was the Case soundtrack, which wasn't even used. Suge did him the favor to support him during his legal wranglings, Tupac said. Tupac began to see Suge as a well-funded, well-armed potential ally. While in prison, he asked his wife Keisha Morris to relay a message to Suge. He was broke and needed help. On top of the lawyer's fees and everything else, his mother was losing her house. Suge sent $15,000 and put it on his books, said Reggie Wright Jr., Death Row's head of security. Tupac was jubilant and sent Suge another message, that he'd like to see him. Few places in the U.S. were farther away from Los Angeles than Dannemora, New York, where Tupac was incarcerated, but Suge began coming out to see him. Further, Death Row offered him something no one else seemed to be able to deliver: release. Death Row's lawyer, David Kenner, pledged to help Tupac with his case and began working to spring him on an appeal bond. Suge didn't just try to recruit Tupac to his label. He offered him a place in his family, the most powerful and out-of-control family in hip-hop. Death Row was under the umbrella of Interscope, the label where Tupac released his first 3 albums. Relinquishing Tupac to Death Row amounted to little more than shuffling paperwork, at least from a corporate perspective. Suge's courtship of Tupac came with Jimmy Iovine and Interscope's blessing. According to many accounts, Iovine seemed anxious to get rid of Tupac, stressed out about the chaos surrounding his every move. From a musical perspective, pairing Tupac with Dre, a producer the rapper had long admired, was smart. In real life, the consequences of putting Suge and Tupac together would be nuclear, and some have blamed Iovine for not anticipating the fallout. Iovine declined comment on this issue. Although many close to him advised him against it, Tupac decided to jump to Death Row. "I know I'm selling my soul to the devil," he said. Tupac's manager, Atron Gregory, who'd worked tirelessly for Tupac's release, grudgingly stepped aside. On September 16, 1995, Kenner presented Tupac with a 3-page handwritten memo, standing in for a contract, appointing Suge as his manager, and binding him to Death Row for 3 albums, promising him an advance of at least $1 million per work, as well as $500,000 in expenses, including $125,000 for a car and $250,000 for his legal fund. Less than a month later, Interscope and Atlantic Records put up the $1.4 million bond, and he was out. Though Tupac always thanked Suge for bailing him out, he didn't actually supply the money. Suge's role seems to have had more to do with greasing the wheels, and the $1.4 million was actually an advance on Tupac's future royalties. "It wasn't a legal contract," said Charles Ogletree Jr., a lawyer who would later represent Tupac. "It was absurd that anyone with an opportunity to reflect would agree to those terms. It was only because he was in prison that he signed it." Suge Knight's dual role as Tupac's manager and his label representation was a conflict of interest. But the deal came with front-end benefits, including a house for a fanny and material spoils galore for Tupac: vehicles, jewelry, vacations. Outside the prison's doors, a white limousine took him to a private plane, and he was off.